Before I get into the meat of this video, it's important to preface by looking at the game in its own bubble. New Super Mario Bros. U is a really good 2D platformer. Having recently completed it in a casual playthrough for the first time, I walked away from the game feeling pretty satisfied for the most part. None of the levels I played had any noticeable drops in quality, with each stage offering something individually different that's at the very least unique, while fun and engaging at best. The game looks incredibly clean graphically. The soundtrack has great range from bouncy and upbeat tracks to the more menacing vibes of the tower and castle levels. And the way behind Mario really makes you feel like you're Italian. By no stretch is this a particularly hard game, both because it tends to be rather forgiving and easy, as well as having such tight controls coinciding with a spin jump to correct any distances you may have felt you were off by. But the main meat of the adventure is still an enjoyable time. There's also the additional modes. The only one I really found particular joy from was the challenges, which I'd possibly argue have more replay value than the main game in itself and is a welcome addition. However, for the theme of this video, I'd like to only centre my attention on the main story mode, from Bowser's introduction to the game's credits. If this is what the entire context of the game truly was, then I could easily justify this game as being quite a good starting point for the Wii U and for Mario platformers. Now, let's consider the game in the context of reality. And this is where the bubble bursts for New Super Mario Bros. U. First, let's consider the other games in the series. When the original New Super Mario Bros. Came out on Nintendo DS, it had been 14 years since the last new Mario 2D platformer. The new in the title not only gave it that sense of freshness, but it was also quite true. Cut to 3 years later for a second entry in the series, New Super Mario Bros. Wii, to come out, then another 3 years later in 2012, when both New Super Mario Bros. U and 2 were released 3 months apart from one another. All of a sudden, what was once a breath of fresh air had started to stagnate. I won't pretend like this is some outlandish decision. It's very obvious based on how well the original and Wii sold that Nintendo was likely going to make further entries in the series. That being said, going from a wholly new game style in over a decade to releasing 3 entries in just 6.5 years is going to lead to fatigue. Throughout that period as well, the level structure stayed rather repetitive. Let's take Stone Slide Tower for instance, as it's a typical New Super Mario Bros. Stage setup. It starts with the main gimmick in a safe yet clearly visible position, which gives the player an immediate sense of what entails once they move past it. This is then succeeded with a pretty safe yet slightly harder variation of the gimmick, before giving a brief window of a breathing room. The level continues in this manner throughout, giving the player incremental obstacles of increasing difficulty in amongst brief moments of relief, before the gimmick typically ends in the hardest point so far, finishing the gimmick at its peak just shy of the flagpole, or in this case, the boss. There's other things in the level that can sway its individual difficulty. Star coins, for instance, could give the player an additional level of challenge stacked on the current obstacle. Then there's also the red and occasionally green coin rings, which give a small payoff but require speedier and more strenuous platforming. This isn't a sound science. Sometimes the star coins are located in a safe area to obtain away from the main level, sometimes the level decides to lay out an incredibly easy finish for the player, and the difficulty isn't going to be on this consistent graph from level to level. But this is the archetypal mold for a level in its franchise. In one game, it's enjoyable. In the 4th entry in this style, it really starts to show its wear. Also, after 4 games worth, new ideas and returns start to diminish. The inclusions in Wii following DS were pretty substantial. Multiplayer mode was a massive addition, some signature power-ups like the Ice Flower and Propeller Mushroom made their debuts in the games, and it reintroduced the Koopa Kids as world bosses. Not all of these changes are going to necessarily be good. I personally would take Big Goomba over any Koopaling, but the principle that there's more of a standalone identity with Wii still stands. 2 is a direct sequel to the original, yet absolutely establishes itself as its own beast in the series with the coin gimmick. Is it a good gimmick? No. The money motif is incredibly shallow, and you get nothing for it, but it's ostensibly the most different entry in the franchise. Coin power-ups, coin rings, coin blocks, a coin counter, it's something different. But when you get to U, I really think that it's missing things that truly carve its own identity. An obvious inclusion is the boost mode with the gamepad, but that's for a later point. So omitting that for the time being, it introduces the Super Acorn, a power-up I admittedly really quite like. The world is now interconnected in the same style as Super Mario World, which is a nice reintroduction. Boom Boom appeared for the first time since Mario 3, and that's really it. The Challenges mode is great and unique, though again, I'm trying to only consider what the main game mode is offering. Nabbit levels are new, except the idea is reminiscent of the Toad levels in Mario Bros. Wii. Graphically, there's maybe one instance where U is different to every other entry, whereas a lot of the time the sounds and presentation are nearly identical to its predecessors. New Super Mario Bros. U struggles to stand on its own merits. It's arguably the most routine in the franchise. And when you get onto the trajectory of 3D Mario games at this point, it compounds it further. The genre had started to deviate towards the 2D model of designing stages as well. The Super Mario Galaxy games are still tremendous, but their distance from 64 and Sunshine's more open-ended levels towards the linear-based level approach is pretty noticeable. If you have a spectrum of Mario games with strictly linear and strictly open-world stages, I think the Mario Galaxy games lean closer to here than there. This doesn't even include Super Mario 3D Land, a 3D platformer entirely in the style of the 2D games, that was released a year before Mario Bros. U. So now, not only were the major 3D platformers becoming more similar in structure, but there were 3D Mario games almost exactly in the style of the 2D games. And to reiterate, as I've gone on quite a bit negatively, I don't think any of these games are bad. Some I like more than others, but there isn't anything here that's below average. By this point in the series, however, with all the context in mind, I hope I've made it clear why U falls short of the mark. And its third strike is where I really find it to be a disappointment. What does New Super Mario Bros. U do as a launch game to show off the Wii U? Well, why just look at the gamepad, I guess? If this is such an integral part of the system, surely the boost mode feature it's made for utilises it brilliantly. Oh, that's it. That's what you can use the gamepad differently for. Really. You're able to place blocks and stun enemies with nothing else. What a boring and forgettable feature in all honesty. Going off an IGN interview about the behind the scenes of the game's development, one of the lead producers, Takashi Tezuka, explicitly made it clear that the levels were planned out to have the single player experience in mind. Boost mode, by design, is not a necessity, nor does it massively change any of the gameplay. While it's great that on the odd occurrence you could have 5 players at any one time playing, the fifth role here is severely lacking. Unlike Nintendo Land, that had the asymmetrical function of the controllers work beautifully, this one just feels so much less involved. It might be alright if you have a younger player that can't really control a character who still wants to play anyway, but there are 4 character slots. How likely is it that you have too many people to play the game with? The boost mode feature is so unimportant to the game that when the Switch port, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, was released, the entire feature was gone. The gamepad's marketed function for the game. Gone. If I were to score New Super Mario Bros. U, despite all that I've said about it, I would still probably give it a 7 out of 10, but it loses out thanks to it being a rather uninspired new entry in a saturated series with a gimmick that is catered towards being accessible for players, yet isn't worth much of anything. So what's amazing is that a year after the game's release in the year of Luigi, did it get a DLC spin-off called New Super Luigi U, and this one does a much better job than the base game. It would be a disservice to ignore that the levels in this game do quite a bit different than any other in the franchise, with some really fun, experimental and new ideas to deviate from the core series. But even if I pretend that the levels are homogeneous to the structure of the previous entries, here's what New Super Luigi U does to the concept. Every level gives the player 100 seconds to work with, compared to the other game's more liberal timer. Every level still has 3 star coins to find, some levels still have the red and green rings, but the style and pace of the levels are now so distinctive. They're a welcome addition. There isn't a moment to breathe or really collect yourself relative to the other games. The brief moments in between obstacles are proportionally as short as well, or in some cases the level literally just doesn't stop. In this format, I find the design much more replayable and enjoyable than U, as well as pretty much every other New Super Mario Bros. Game. It's as well defined as 2's gimmick, yet the substance is there as well. And while New Super Luigi U doesn't have a killer usage of the gamepad, it still only has boost mode as an option, it inexplicably is still able to give a more accessible option to players better than Mario U, through one key inclusion. To make a further distinction between Luigi and Mario U, you can't play as Mario in multiplayer. Instead, you have Nabbit as the 4th option to play as. Whereas Mario, Luigi, Yellow and Blue Toad are all the exact same in performance, Nabbit is able to run through enemies without taking damage. As a trade-off for not being able to use power-ups, the only way Nabbit can die is if it falls into a pit or a lava-like death trap. With this character, Luigi U is now better catered towards people of all skill brackets. If you want a regular challenge, then go with the base characters. However, if you have someone that's not too great at video games that still wants to play, then give them Nabbit. All enemies are no longer an obstacle, all they need to worry about are making some of the trickier jumps. Conversely, while boost mode got largely disregarded and left in the dust for U Deluxe, Nintendo included Toadette as a new character, along with Nabbit, to further add depth to the options for players. Each one has a listed difficulty in the character selection menu and makes it clear what player they're for. In stark contrast, New Super Luigi U is able to carve out its own unique legacy. With a refreshing design shift for its levels, plus adding a new character which improves upon the approachable ideas of Mario U and is further expanded in Mario U Deluxe. While it's disappointing that Mario U didn't do too much with the gamepad as a launch title, at the very least other games released simultaneously will try their best at utilising it more. The aforementioned Nintendo Land did a great job with it, and Zombie U? Well, that's something for the future. But hopefully, down the line, Nintendo can find the perfect use for the gamepad and Mario.